For those of you who don't know who I am or what my organization is, Montana Environmental Information Center is an organization that was founded in Montana in the early 70s. It was founded to lobby the Montana legislature on environmental issues. There's so many people in Montana who have been involved in our organization since its beginning. And we have grown stronger and stronger as time has gone on. And we right now have found that our most important work has to do with the state level work on climate issues and climate policy. And that the motivation in our state is really wonderful. And we have a great resource of people to help do that, despite our politics. So I just want to say I fundamentally disagree with James Hansen, my hero. I think he's wrong. What I heard tonight, first off, is that James Hansen thinks that we have to solve all of the political problems in our country in order to solve the climate crisis. And I just don't believe that's true. We need to solve all those problems that he mentioned. There's no doubt about that. But we can and are solving a lot of our climate issues because of organizations like we heard from tonight, local organizations, Climate Smart Missoula, MELT. We have innovators throughout this state who are working hard to try and switch our energy system to a clean energy system. Montana Renewable Energy Association, if Andrew was still here, he's in the way back. You know, there are innovators throughout our state who are working on switching our energy system. And to say that we have to solve the political problem that we face today before we can solve the climate crisis, it will be too late. We don't have that much time. And it's already happening. And I'm so heartened by Montanans. So we are a purple state, right? We are this funny mix of red and blue. But what we found in polling, as Jim mentioned earlier, is that in Montana, 95% of the people in our state, so that's got to be Republicans and Democrats, want more more energy efficiency. 92% of the people in the state want more solar energy developed. 87% of the people in this state want more wind energy developed. 67% of the people in the state want more coal. So Montanans want it all, but overwhelmingly, Montanans want clean energy, far more so than more coal. And that gives me hope. And it gives me hope because there's innovators like Carl out there. There are innovators like people that work at MREA and all of the businesses that belong to MREA, that we are going to get there despite what James Hansen thinks. I just disagree with him, despite him being a hero for our movement. Change is happening. And it is, we've been looking at the Obama administration making change in this country on climate-related issues for the last, 4 years, really, and being really excited about it. And it's caused a lot of us to become complacent. We've been thinking the federal government is going to save us. It's going to pass this great climate policy. It's going to limit carbon emissions from coal plants all over the country. It's going to do this and it's going to do that. Isn't it wonderful? Obama was going to save the climate crisis. He signed the Paris Accords, and we all went into our own little worlds, and we all did our own little thing, thinking, great, good. He's doing the work that needs to be done. And he was. But that isn't where the real work was being done. And it is not where the real work is being done. And it is not where change is going to occur. And that is because it's happening at the local level and it's happening at the state level. The federal level has always been pie in the sky, in my opinion, other than things like tax incentives, which are really, really helpful to level the playing field with renewables and energy efficiency and fossil fuels, who all of their tax incentives have been baked into the system since the 70s. They have had all these tax breaks for a long time, and they're baked into our tax codes. So when people say, oh, the production tax credit is unfair and it gives wind this unfair advantage, the only reason the U.S. Congress passed production tax credit is to level the playing field with fossil fuels. So while the federal level, there is a role for them to play when it comes to things like tax incentives to help encourage renewable energy, it is not the place where change is happening. And change is happening, regardless of how disheartened so many of us are at the federal level and what's going on. President Trump, in my mind, is a walking disaster. That, for us, we can't look to them. We can't look to the feds. We can't look to the EPA to solve this crisis. We can look right here at home. And I think you're hearing that. You heard somebody, Abby, talk tonight about energy efficiency being exciting. She's right. It is the most boring topic, no offense, but it is the most important thing we can do. And it's happening. Northern Plains has taken the lead on the PACE legislation. How they can make something called PACE sound exciting is beyond me, but they've done it, and they are moving forward, and we just might get PACE legislation because of Northern Plains efforts. And that's the real work that needs to be done. The states have always been where this work has been done, always. Where have renewable energy standards passed? Has it been at the federal level? No. Renewable energy standards passed at the state level. Even Montana has a renewable energy standard, thanks to Senator Tester. And Governor Schweitzer, but Senator Tester was the sponsor of that bill when it passed in 2005. We have net metering in the states. Do we have a net metering law at the federal level? No. We have net metering at the state level. Lots of states have net metering. In fact, Montana passed net metering, which is the system in which you can put solar panels on your roof and you can get credit from your utility for the energy that they produce. We passed that in 1999. Now, we think things are bleak now, but I was lobbying in 1999, and it wasn't pretty. We had Roscoe as our governor, we had Republican-controlled House and Senate, and we passed net metering because it was a good idea. And do you know who helped MEIC pass that legislation when it started to flail? Northwestern Energy, because they didn't think it was a big deal at that time. Now, who is the biggest opponent to net metering? Northwestern Energy. But we're still there, and we are increasing the number of net meter systems in our across the state every year. And now we have a whole industry in Montana, a whole industry that is developing across the state, not just out in Colstrip, not just in eastern Montana, not out in Sydney. It's developing in Missoula and Helena and Bozeman and Billings and little communities across the state. These solar installers are taking over. In fact, new job reports are showing that 1 in 50 new jobs in the United States are in the solar industry. 1 in 50. That's incredible. Let me find some more statistics for you, because I love these stats. They just came out in the last couple days. Solar energy now employs slightly more workers than natural gas, over twice as many as coal, over 3 times as many as wind, and almost 5 times as many as nuclear. Solar energy is our future. And with the help of projects like pumped hydro, we actually can make these intermittent resources work for us around the clock. So where is this being done? It's not being done at the federal level. It's being done right here in Montana. So when we look at what are we facing here? What are the things, other than joining local organizations, that really do help at a local level? What are the things that are going on at the state level that are really making a difference when it comes to climate policy? And I'll tell you what it is. It's a room full of men who are making these decisions. These are 60-plus-year-old men who are sitting around the table, and they're making these decisions based on cost. They're not thinking about climate change. Most of them are climate deniers. They are. They think climate change is a hoax. But that doesn't matter. We need to talk to them in the language they can hear. And the language they hear is jobs and money. So we have a public service commission, and I just want to do a slight shout out to a public service commission that I never thought I'd be doing a shout out to.
It's a miracle.
Right, it's a miracle. The Public Service Commission in Montana is run by 5 Republicans, and they have made 2 decisions in the last 2 weeks that are phenomenal, and we should be thanking them. Some of these people are serious Tea Party Republicans, but they are paying attention to the cost of electricity for consumers. And what does that mean? That means we are in the catbird seat because the cost for renewable energy is plummeting. It has been plummeting. Solar energy just bypassed wind as a cheaper resource in a lot of places in the world. It's never universal, but that's impressive. And wind is already super cost competitive. Keep in mind, Northwestern Energy, Montana's biggest utility in the state, right? It's our biggest utility. It is the only utility in the state of Montana that has an interest in the Colstrip power plant. It owns 200 megawatts approximately of a 2,200 megawatt facility. And Northwestern's most expensive resource, guess what it is? It's Colstrip. It's not Judith Gap. It's not the Spion-Cop Wind Project. It's not energy efficiency. It's Colstrip. And when you also factor in a couple of what they call qualifying facilities that they have to buy the power from, do you know what the other 2 most expensive resources are? A waste coal plant and a waste petroleum plant that they are required under the federal law to purchase their energy. They're small, fortunately, and those contracts will end in the early 20s, and those plants will be done because they can't compete on the open market today with wind and solar. And so what did our Public Service Commission do recently? 2 things. Now, Jim talked about one of them, which was remarkable. So when utilities, this is so dense and it's so boring, but it's so important. When utilities provide us power, they're monopolies, right? So they are regulated by the Public Service Commission or Utility Commission, depends on what state you're in, who make sure that monopoly is providing that power in a way that benefits consumers, that they're not just going to run away, make money off of all of us, because they could if they weren't regulated. So that utility has to provide a plan, a 20-year plan to the utility saying, this is how we think we're going to operate over the course of the next 20 years. These are the resources we think we're going to need. And here's the data to support that. And these are supposed to be very comprehensive plans, and the Utility Commission is supposed to look at them. And then down the road, as the utility wants to build something new, the commission looks back to the plan and says, how does that fit into your resource plan? Now, this is all dry work, but something really fun happened last summer. So the Utility Commission, in my world is fun, right? Utility Commission took public comments. And I stood up at this hearing and I was giving them my spiel about how I thought Northwestern Energy's resource plan was lousy because, as you heard, it was completely reliant on gas. No new wind, no new solar. The only wind they wanted was the minimum they needed to meet the renewable energy standard, but no renewable energy that it wasn't required already by law to obtain. It just wanted more gas because when it builds new things, it makes more money. So that's what they wanted to do. And one of the commissioners said to me, how do we get people engaged? How do we make people pay attention to what we're doing? This affects their pocketbook. This affects their everyday lives, the decisions we're making right now. And I said, well, you got to make it interesting. And I don't know how you do that. So I thought about it, and I worked with a few people, and we managed to try to make it interesting by having people submit their choices, their energy choices, in a picture to the Utility Commission. And they got more comments than I think they've ever gotten. They got almost 400 comments from people saying, we want more clean energy. And people were specific about what types of clean energy they wanted. And then the commission did a funny thing. It made the right decision. What the commission did 2 weeks ago is it said, Northwestern, you haven't justified all these gas plants. We are not, well, I was there when they decided to write the letter to Northwestern. And they said, we need to get this out immediately because we want this out before Northwestern goes out and asks for proposals from people to build its gas plant. So the commission that was a shot across the bow because utilities like Northwestern are risk averse. They don't want to go build something unless they know that we as consumers are going to pay them for it and that they're going to make a nice rate of return on top of that amount of money that they spent. And when the commission sent this letter and said, we think your planning is severely flawed, you didn't look at, you only looked at gas, you didn't even justify that, and you didn't look at, and then it listed the resources it thought that they completely gave short shrift to. The first one, pumped hydro. Hey, yeah. The second, carbon capture and sequestration. I consider that a throwaway because nobody in their right mind would do that. And then they talked about large-scale wind and solar. And then they talked about demand-side response. So as Abby was talking about, energy efficiency. How can Northwestern acquire more efficiency and save consumers money? So what they said in Northwestern is, don't go building a gas plant and expect consumers to pay for it until you have done the math and shown us and shown the public what that math looks like. Because if you build that gas plant, you might not get reimbursed. So number one thing our commission just did, and that's phenomenal. And I can tell you, I've talked to so many people out of state who work in utility commissions, and they think what our commission just did was remarkable. So this is a big deal in the energy world. The other thing they did is, Carl was talking about the coal strip line, right? I don't know, I could talk all night, so I want somebody to keep track of my time and tell me when I'm done. The coal strip line is a giant transmission line that moves power from the coal strip plant to West Coast utilities. As I said, only one Montana utility is invested in coal strip. There's one owner, Talon Energy, used to be PPL, used to be Montana Power, that owns some of it, but they want out. They're losing money left and right because they're not regulated. They don't have a customer base to guarantee a profit on the power from that plant. So Talon is a throwaway. Northwestern is the only utility in Montana that owns a share of Colstrip and has to, and passes it on to us and makes a profit off it. Everybody else is on the West Coast. And what do Oregon and Washington want? They don't want coal. They want energy, they don't want coal power. They are looking at their economics. They're looking at the wildfire seasons that have been tremendously expensive for them. They're looking at their shellfish industry that is being harmed by ocean acidification. They are looking at the economic impacts of climate change. They are real, they are experiencing them now, and they don't want any more coal power, and they want to do the responsible thing and wean themselves off coal. So these utilities are sitting there going, okay, we don't want any more power from Colstrip. Well, they didn't exactly say that. We forced them to say that in a lawsuit. But they are saying that. Their consumers are saying no more. There's a little revolution going on out there. And those utilities are looking right now to replace that energy. So we have a firm date on when Colstrip 1 and 2, the 2 of the 4 units are going to close. And, 2022, maybe. I think it'll close sooner. But regardless, they will not be operating those 2 units past 2022. And that is 700 megawatts of power. So those utilities that own Colstrip Unit 1 and 2, one of them is Puget Sound Energy, they have to replace that power. Where are they going to get it? Well, I know Carl's done a lot of studies. We had a study done by an independent consultant. The best place for those utilities to buy their power, if they want clean energy, is right here in Montana. Our wind blows when their demand is highest. So when everybody's turning on the lights in the middle of winter, turning on their heat, that's when they need the most power. That's when our wind blows. Their wind blows in the summertime. So they should be looking to Montana, and they can couple our wind with Carl's project, and they have a year-round 24/7 resource. And it's cheap. It's really cost competitive, except for one little thing. there's a transmission system that's run by something called the Bonneville Power Association. And BPA has 15,000 miles worth of transmission line. 15,000 miles in the Pacific Northwest. So Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. There's a 90-mile stretch of that 15,000 miles that they charge an extra rate on to move power on that 90-mile stretch, that little tiny 90-mile stretch in Montana that makes our wind energy less competitive with resources in Washington and Oregon. Guess who doesn't want to get rid of that rate, that extra charge? The West Coast utilities, because they want to build gas instead. They think that if they can keep that rate high, the rate for Montana wind coming into their state high, then they will build gas plants in their own state. So there's a concerted effort right now to try to get rid of that, what people call a pancake rate, because it's stacked on top of another rate, the regular rate that the 15,000 miles has. This extra 90-mile charge, we want to get rid of it. We are working as hard as we can to do that. We're involved in the BPA rate case. And you know what our Public Service Commission did last week? They sent a letter to BPA saying, get rid of the pancake rate. Really? It was shocking. Hey! These are the little decisions that are happening at the state level. They're happening at the local level that make a difference on whether we're going to be able to solve the climate crisis. They're esoteric. They might be boring. But I can tell you, last week, 2 weeks ago now, a bunch of members from 350 Missoula, Montana now, showed up in Helena at a Public Service Commission meeting in a room full of men in blue suits. And they were average citizens. The Public Service Commission took note. They got to say something. They were well-spoken. They were factual. The people who showed up and came over from Missoula did a great job. And that is exactly what the Public Service Commission asked of us, is to bring people into the process. And they are the ones who are making decisions on whether Northwestern is going to move forward with building 7 new gas plants, 13 units, 7 new plants, or do something else. And unless people show up at those types of decisions, the wrong decision will be made, because Northwestern has an awful lot of resources and has a lot of incentive, a profit incentive, to try to convince the commission that more gas is the right path forward. But when real humans from outside of Helena show up, they take note. And we really need to increase that. That's what we need to do. We need people to show up in Helena. So Northern Plains has a rally day at the legislature. Other conservation groups have another rally day the week after. And that's a rally day on February 23rd for clean energy. And that's MEIC and Montana Conservation Voters and Montana Audubon and Renewable Energy Association. There will be a rally that day for clean energy in the Capitol. And that afternoon, Dick Barrett, you all know and love, I'm sure. Thank you very much for sending him to Helena. He and Mike Phillips are supporting a bill, and there's going to be a hearing on that day to try to make Montana develop a plan in which we analyze our carbon emissions, and then we figure out how to reduce them. It's going to be the big climate bill of the session. Show up in Helena, testify. Do something more than you did last year. That's the most we can ask of everybody. And there's so many people who did so much last year. But if we all do a little bit more and we keep working at the state and the local level, we can solve this problem. We're going to have to wait through 4 years to solve it at the national level. Maybe 2, maybe 1. Hard to say. Maybe we'll go like
It's a while.
but it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take a concerted effort. But I disagree with James Hansen. I think we can get there, and I think we can do it with people power. I think that's enough.
Thanks.